Let's see.
Jyoti, you can start admitting.
Hello, everybody. Great to see people joining us.
Oh.
Hi. It's always so magical when people's faces and names start appearing. Thank you for joining us today. We're just going to take a few minutes just to get everybody into the meeting together.
And we'd love to invite you to turn your cameras on, please, as we're just arriving. It's great to see all your faces. This will be slightly participatory and performative, so we would love to connect with you to see and be seen.
Thank you for joining us. Good to see people from all different places here today. We'll just wait maybe one more minute before we start.
So whilst you're waiting, this is Elsa De Silva and I'm the tech host. I've posted 3 questions, not 3 questions, but you can use the chat section to tell us who you are and where you're from. And there's a menti.com poll that we have, a word cloud actually, that we've been harvesting from the previous sessions, where you can list 3 actions that you take to build peace. So try doing that whilst you're waiting for people to join it.
Good. So Haley and Jackie, what do you think? Shall we give it a go?
Yep. Let's go.
Let's start with our dance and drama and peace building session. Welcome. My name is Erica Rose Jeffrey, and I will be the moderator, but also one of the panelists here today as part of this session. And we are so thrilled to be able to share our work with you and also to engage together in some participatory approaches to arts-based peace building. So before I go any further, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the owners of the lands from which all of us are joining this meeting today. I live and work on the Yagara and Turrbal lands near Brisbane, and I want to pay my deep respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to acknowledge the important role that culture has played through thousands of years around building community and connections. If you'd like to take a moment and write in the chat the acknowledgement to the Indigenous people in the lands and where you're joining us from, please feel free to do that. Today in our session, we're going to be focusing on the ideas of how we can set in motion a discussion on the fundamental role of the arts in connecting communities and co-creating a diverse and multilateral world. We're each going to dive into our area of expertise before we open the discussion to curious questions, hear from different voices, and explore diverse experiences. I want to acknowledge the hard work that has gone on behind the scenes, all of the wonderful logistics coordination and the Rotary Peace Fellows alumni and Rotary in hosting this event and bringing us all together today. Uh, During the session, everybody will be muted for the presentations, and the session is being recorded as we are going through it today. And if you want to go ahead and add questions while we're speaking in the chat, that's a great way for us to continue the dialogue in a couple different facets at the same time. So I'm going to start with just a brief introduction of myself and then pass it to my fellow speakers today. So I'm Erica Rose Jeffrey, and I am a researcher, a practitioner, and a self-proclaimed dance activist. I'm going to pass it to Jackie.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jackie Cowley. I'm from Papua New Guinea. I'm a drama educator, an applied theatre practitioner, and a curator of stories.
And hi, everyone. I'm Hayley Linthwaite. I am an Imagineer. I'm also a drama practitioner, a facilitator, a self-proclaimed creative provocateur, and a global change maker.
So Hayley, quick question. So how do you practice possibilities?
Well, imagination is the key to change. In order to create change, you must first imagine change. So I want to start by inviting you all to close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Deepen as you inhale and lengthen as you exhale. Now imagine you can see a giant, red, shiny, helium-filled balloon. This is no ordinary balloon. It's an incredibly buoyant balloon, confidently, effortlessly, floating in the sky above your head. What does this symbolize for you? How does this balloon make you feel? Now, with the sharpest of steel sharp pins, I pop it, something falls out and you catch it. Opening your eyes, right into the chat box. What's inside? Share with us what's popped out, what is revealed to you. How many of you imagined something that doesn't exist? How many of you imagined something huge that you can't even hold in your hands? How many didn't have anything fall out of their balloon? We are limited in what we can imagine ourselves by our frame of reference, our thinking, our mood and emotions, our life experiences. Play is the bridge to unlock that. Play is our first platform for experimentation and problem solving. Play is how we engage our imagination, physical, cognitive, and emotional strengths to be flexible and agile. Play releases inhibitions. We can't be playful if restricted by beliefs, values, and attitudes. Play invites us to let go of hierarchy, prejudices, rules, and regulations, and open up to the contribution and experience of others. Cast your mind back. How did you play in the world and with other people when you were a child? How do we tap into something that came so natural to us as children? When was the last time you gave yourself permission to play? Maybe we've forgotten how. Maybe we need a reminder. From my experience, there are a kaleidoscope of ways to engage playfully. My top 3 to unlock a mindset of play are accepting offers, yes and, the ability to play in groups or as an individual. The second is suspending disbelief. You need to be able to imagine something that might not be part of this reality or even exist yet. And thirdly, immersion, losing inhibitions, building belief, deepening into a flow state, losing a sense of time with autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Because in play, we forget ourselves and we are intrinsically motivated. We're not doing this for rewards. We're doing this for our own enjoyment, satisfaction, and a sense of achievement. Where are your opportunities to play? In my work, I use play as a stimulus to explore what might be possible. The evolutionary function of imagination and play is to grasp hidden forms of order and unrealized possibilities in the world. So, for example, in 2016, when we brought 24 diverse leaders from across Kosovo together to be part of the 2-week Imagine a Day project, which invites individuals and communities to imagine a future that they wish to see, to believe in the impossible dream, and to trust in their innate ability to activate sustainable change. Having 8 different ethnicities and languages, all having experienced different sides of the Kosovo War. They were different in age, from approximately 19 to 60, backgrounds from different geographical locations, beliefs, aspirations, representing different organizations and sectors. Our first step was to invite the leaders to play. Beginning with uplifting music and an ever-increasing supply of balloons, the leaders needed to ensure that the balloons never touched the ground. You can see this video on the Imagine a Day project website. As they relaxed and the laughter and joy of the game took over, play transcended personal barriers, biases, fears, and language. The value of shared learning through play underpinned subsequent workshop activities, from energizers to improvisation games, storytelling to role play, debriefing and reflection. Embracing notions of play, participants creatively explored, presented, and discussed their fears and hopes for the future. Through these lived experiences, the impossible was imagined, meaningful solutions devised, and pertinent recommendations for action discovered. Because imagination and play enables us to cope with the unexpected, the rapidly changing and the unfamiliar, they are important tools I currently engage whilst working with leaders across Australia. Discovery is iterative, and the active use of creativity, imagination, and play helps leaders continue to learn as they develop, test, validate, and refine their solutions-focused thinking. For example, I work quite closely with one of Australia's largest retailers who needed to rapidly pivot during COVID-19. Support staff went to store teams. They had to move massive amounts of stock and adapt to a boom in online delivery, all to support their commitment to customers and community. Thankfully, we've been partnering in their whole system transformation for years. And in our current disruptive global context, we lent into an opportunity to playfully collaborate together, to find peace within chaos by working through it together to discover new possibilities. The team report feeling more connected because of it, and are now thinking about how else they can challenge themselves with their frame of reference for what is possible. It sparked a whole new outlook. One leader said, "From bushfires to a worldwide pandemic, we don't know what might come, and that's okay. It's full of possibility." We're in an age where we need to imagine and play because we are living through the unimaginable. Imaginative play is an act of creation. Whatever can be imagined can happen. Imagination is the key to change. In order to create change, you must first imagine change.
Thank you so much, Haley. We're gonna go past to Jackie. And Jackie, I have a question for you. And I know that you're gonna focus on the importance of stories. And my question for you is, how do you create alternative narratives for change?
Thank you, Erica. Thank you very much, Haley. That was beautiful. One of the things that I do is try to collate, curate stories and co-create these stories and these narratives with community partners. And I think that's the glue that holds the work that I do to create something that thinks about the possibilities for the future. So I'll start off and that leads nicely, I think, into the work that I'm doing and the presentation that I'm going to focus on. And it is about stories and how important these stories are in terms of where we are right now and what they provide in terms of possibilities and rethinking. Like Halia, I am within drama and do drama, and also applied theatre. So those different kinds of ways of doing things, but of the processes and harnessing those things. So my presentation is around reframing narratives, but through the collection of various different narratives. So I come from a place called Papua New Guinea, and I work across Australia and PNG. And one of the things that I often hear is the way in which Papua New Guinea is talked about, in that it lacks the ability to change, to develop, even though it is a resource-rich country. And it always makes me wonder, sometimes angry but frustrated, that oftentimes the work that is done with my government, but also international aid that comes in, never quite captures the lived experiences or the work from within. Communities, partners that are working always have a way of creating change from within, because they draw on the complexities of their space and place in order to create this change. And so I live within these two realities, and often the work that myself and my colleagues do is harness these different narratives. So I work with community partners, drawing on different forms and ways of participating, but underlying all of this is that community partnership and being together with them. So with this particular example is working with the human rights defenders around sorcery-related violence and and gender-based violence, and what are the kinds of ways that we can work with those that understand the issues from within and create things. But what are the ways in which these various different stories can present opportunities and ways to think and look at ways to think about things differently, or how to address the issues. Because oftentimes narratives of the outside come in with these frameworks and we think around them and see whether they work, and often they don't work. So we try to harness the various different narratives. And so one of the work that I've done, or we have done, is with the Highlands Human Rights Defenders, and it is with a collection of different digital stories and presenting them together. What is important with this is that this is an array of various different digital stories of individuals, but collectively they form different ways in which people are working in their communities. And people have never thought about this, nor have they thought that communities actually have the ability to do that. And even if they do, then the representation is often wrong. Sometimes it's never with the strength or the capabilities that they have, often with the resilience. And none of those things are woven into any of the dominant narratives around the work. So one of the work that we do is to present an alternative way of looking at different things. So this is work that we have done around sorcery-related violence and gender-based violence, and how people from within are doing work. And in order to do that and to create those stories, because they are complex and they are nuanced, and where I come from, there are over 800 different languages and 1,000 different tribes. And so how then do you respect that while at the same time try to gather the various different ways to look at things? And so drama comes into it, and process drama more, and the forms and the conventions, and how do you harness this, and how do you bring them together, but how do you use their own stories? So the digital stories that I showed you before, how do you weave that into a conversation that gets people starting to talk about sorcery or about gender-based violence? But this is framed in a certain way, so we explore and we contextualize. How do they understand? How do we facilitators understand that? How do we experience this particular issue? And what do the people feel about it? How can we create empathy? So that empathy, we can create a certain change within that, or reflect. How do we create an understanding? What are the drama tools that we can use in order to create that understanding? And after that, what is transformation? How can we change? What are the possibilities and the narratives within that that can create change? But to note that this is not a linear process, and that it is cyclical and reflective every step of the way, because life is messy. And how do we embrace that? And how do we use that within our work? And so those are the sorts of things that we try and capture. So, and one of the things that we do is that when it is being developed, we create these scenarios and these ways of performing. And oftentimes when we, as Haley talked about, pretext or stimulus, what are the ways in which we can create different narratives and for different purposes, and how then can we connect these stories? Sometimes they can be on their own, sometimes they're a collection of them together. And the important part, and I like this quote, you know, it talks about that scenarios can alter people's awareness. If they're used artfully, people actually begin to think about a future that they've ignored or denied. The key is to see a different future that is not inevitable, but one of several genuine possibilities. And how do we do that and instill that within people that often hope has gone out? Looking at a different way of living has gone out. How can we create ways in which they can dream differently? And so when they take these scenarios, then they take them through to communities and create the conversation. So oftentimes performances are played out and people come together and various different forms again are brought into it to try and trigger the conversations that need to be had. And sometimes the conversations are very tenuous. Sometimes communities often perhaps don't like the way that we're doing things. And that's okay, because then it opens up the questions and the possibilities and the reflections and the understanding. And often it is always that we do work with the human rights defenders that are from there. So they draw on those local contexts again to discuss and to talk about the various different things. And when I started off, I talked about representation and doing things differently and representing our stories, and how we work and co-create these collaborations with, for example, human rights defenders. And so when we do the stories, what we do is they go back again to the communities, and human rights defenders or people within communities use these stories for themselves. And what they do is then they go out and they represent themselves in whatever place, in whatever field, but they take their stories and tell their stories in their own words, so people can understand the amount of work that they have done and the challenges that they have, but the absolute resilience and hope that they have for their communities, but also for country. And so these are the women, the human rights defenders, and we hosted them, or they came down to QUT to present and to talk about the wonderful work that they have done back in Papua New Guinea. And I wanted to end on that, in that photograph of the women and the representations, just to say that stories, when curated well with people, can actually work for themselves, because they then use these stories to talk about whatever advocacy or whatever change that they need and they hope to have. There are just a couple of slides of the work that we have done. The toolkit, a snapshot of the toolkit that I used is also there, so you can look at that. Then we have the digital stories are also online on that one, and we have one of the other digital stories that we have is a compilation of, I think, more than 20 of them around gender-based violence, but they are, again, a collection of stories of positive ways in which you could address change. So these are some of the links that are there and that are online. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Jackie. So Erica, how do you use creativity in your work?
Well, thank you, Jackie and Haley. For me, I am first and foremost a dancer, so I usually start with an embodied approach. And so I'm actually going to invite all of you to participate in a movement activity with me, just to the best ability that you can. There are no right or wrong answers for this, so it's just a bit of an exploration. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to find an object or something that you can see in your space. It can be to your side, out the window, behind you. And I want you to start to trace that with a body part. So maybe you choose a finger and you start to trace the outline. Or maybe it's your elbow and you start to trace the outline of that shape with your elbow. Or maybe it's your nose and you're using your nose to trace the outline of the shape. And as you're doing that, try to get the depth of the shape as well. So you're really thinking about, where are the edges? What does the bottom look like? What does the top look like? How do we explore that three-dimensional space? Maybe you're going to try your knee now to give it a bit of a a movement down with your lower body. Now try to think about an object and go inside of it and see if you can imagine the volume on the inside of the shape and how you might trace that with the inside edges. Maybe you take it to your face and you just use your face to trace the inside of the object as you go. Pick one more thing that you see and try to make it really big with your body this time, as big as possible, the largest shape that you can make. Really stretch your whole body, make it larger than life as you go. And bring that back in to your center and just take a big breath in and let it out. And another big breath in and letting it out. Great, thank you for trying that with me. That was a bit of playfulness, I hope, for us as we go. I might share a little bit about my practice. I'm just gonna shift to sharing a few images as we go. And I think that one of the things that I find so interesting is to think about the different ways in which we move with our bodies and the way in which dance is represented in lots of different contexts. So in recent years, dance has taken on increasingly visible roles in politics around the world. It's being used for activism, challenging violence, promoting peace, and encouraging connections across difference. In efforts to contain COVID-19, social distancing means that we've been physically separated. Yet dance continues to connect people in local communities and across vast distances. We're moving together, even if we're physically separated. I feel dance is an important nonverbal means of expression that provides an avenue for political dialogue and an embodied way to understand social and political change. I believe these are valuable aspects of creating the world we want to see going forward. In our new book that I co-wrote with my colleague, Dr. Leslie Pruitt, we explore the relationship between peace building and dance, including insights that dance provides on key debates around peace and conflict. To do so, we consider the work of an NGO and its participants deploying dance for peace building through case studies across 3 contexts: Colombia, the Philippines, and the United States. This dance program took place in several locations in different contexts of violence or conflict and varied approaches to peace. Investigating the application of a dance-based peace-building program across these 3 case studies allowed us to consider nuance and context as well as commonalities across the different locales. We explore how dance as an aesthetic embodied medium can embrace emotions and supplement and sustain other forms of dialogue. In working with young people seeking peaceful social and political change, we learned about many ways that dance can facilitate empathy and support relationships and understanding across difference. The young peace builders we talked to in the research emphasized the need for creativity, finding new ways of expression, and paying close attention to local contexts and differences amongst and between them. All of these insights remain critical today as we grapple with a constantly changing environment. In our research, one of the ideas we explore is the concept of empathy, which was also mentioned by some of my colleagues. This includes prospects and challenges it poses in arts-based peace building. To do so, we analyzed a set of creative dance activities, including the use of mirroring. Mirroring is a well-established dance activity that's used in many settings and contexts, including in mainstream peace building resources as icebreaker and drama activities as well. As seen in our 3 case studies, mirroring can invite interpersonal exchange and support the development of empathy. This empathy can promote understanding across difference and likewise contribute to peace building, including the restructuring of relationships after violence. In short, we suggest that nonviolent ways of expressing emotion are crucial for peace building. Empathy is a key emotion to address in the aim of peace building, and dance activities can offer a promising way to foster empathy development and thus support peace building. This is with the caveat of engaging ongoing, dedicated, critical reflection about content and practice. So just thought I'd share one thought. This is a quote from one of the participants. And after participating in some of the dance and peace building activities, she said, "I think the biggest skill that I've acquired is empathy, is putting myself in the place of others. Now I think I can handle my conflicts a little better because now I think of others instead of thinking only of myself." I continue to see the potential of dance and peace building in my work in Melanesia with Peace and Conflict Studies Institute Australia, or PACSIA. Much of our work focuses on the autonomous region of Bougainville in Papua New Guinea. Over several decades, Bougainville has experienced a violent conflict, the implementation of a successful peace agreement, and now a peaceful referendum, which has resulted in a vote for independence. We are working with local peace builders to facilitate community-based dialogues on the issues of referendum and a peaceful transition. This includes both horizontal dialogue at the village level and vertical dialogue with political leadership. In 2019, we also collaborated on an arts and peace building project, Creative Peace, Our Living Culture. For Creative Peace, the artists gathered together with peace builders to explore the creative ways of building a peaceful future in Bougainville. Using imagination, storytelling, and performance, they engaged difficult questions and embodied ways of understanding difference while working to build social cohesion. Through movement activities, the peace builders and artists worked together. For example, this photo shows women doing movement activities that are around representing reconciliation activities. Or other groups focused on community responses to violence and what different villages are doing around their own solutions. This process invited and encouraged cultural forms of expression to be included as components of the transition process during and after the referendum. While process focused, it also included community performances with arts exchanges and sharing. So in both the research for our book and the Creative Peace Project, there are group dance exchange activities which can serve as vehicles for moments of connection across difference and provide opportunities for recreating identities in ways that can support peace building. While there's still much to unpack about the potential of dance, it's energizing to see that around the world, people of all ages, cultures, and social positions are imagining ways we can connect with our bodies and navigate the world with approaches that also account for the health and well-being of others during COVID-19. For example, Indigenous and First Nations dancers have shared social distance powwows and jingle dances as an act of healing. Meanwhile, citizens of democracies are also using dance to engage in action for change, such as in Belgium, where medical workers use dance as a means of protest regarding the government's handling of coronavirus. Even high-powered decision makers have been joining in public dancing, with politicians in Norway performing a physically distant dance to celebrate their National Day on May 17th. And in the United States, politicians have been holding digital dance parties as part of their campaigns. During Black Lives Matter protests, dance is being used both by protesters as a form of expression, and in some cases, it has been used by National Guard members to diffuse tensions. All of these examples show us that dance is politically powerful and thus an important area to examine in seeking peaceful and just ways to reorient our bodies and our lives and our societies during these complex times. As the pandemic continues, we're all becoming choreographers, navigating our ways through changes we couldn't have imagined a few months ago. Ideas such as personal space, the space bubble that we might use in a dance class, are now present when we go to the stores and we see the markers in the shops about spacing, or the idea when we're going to the park and we're trying to traverse and navigate a pathway. As we are looking at these different ways in which we navigate space, we're also navigating this idea of three-dimensional activity in a two-dimensional space, like video conferencing and this session today. I believe that this enhanced awareness of our bodies holds potential for adding to our shared understandings of peace building. It is an important time to refocus on our bodies in space and how we build connections through movement, even when physically separated. One of the lessons of dance is that it takes practice, and that even when we make a misstep, to take a breath and try again, that we are moving together even when we are far apart. Thank you. So I think at this point, we wanted to open up to some questions before we go into the breakout rooms, and to have a chance for some, both in the chat, and if you want to either physically raise your hand, or you can put your blue thumb up by your name in the chat as well, or in the participants. We can see if you have a question. We're happy to do a little bit of Q&A before we go into the breakout rooms. Let's see. I know we had an initial question that came through Huva, so we might start with that one, and we'll see if other folks have questions as well. So the first question that came through to us was, how can we use dance and drama and music for peace building in fragile and conflict affected areas? I pass that to one of my colleagues to start.
Jackie, do you want to kick off with that one? You're on mute.
How do we use dance, drama, music for peace building in fragile and conflict areas? Yeah, so I'll try, and then Haley and Erica Rose can come in as well. As I talked about earlier, some of the work that we do is around source-related violence, and often within the space of tribal fighting. So how then do we come in and talk about change when there are a lot of tension still going on there? And I think two things. One is that we are invited in, or we work with those community leaders or women and men that already want us to be part of the process. And then we have conversations and then start to create stories together, meaningful stories. And some of the stories, and I think that this is a great one, is that when women share their stories, they talk about the pain, maybe for example, of the tribal fighting and how that has impacted them. And how do you weave that into a narrative to create the empathy that is needed for others to understand that, you know, tribal fighting often impacts women and children more than they do the men. So how then do you create such narratives like that? The second part, I think, is thinking about the safety and the spaces that we work with and within these places, because they are heightened with fear and violence. And then what is it, those that are within the workshop trying to create the change might also be at risk. So how do we create safe spaces? And the answer to that often is working with those from within and seeing how that can happen. So I think I'll leave that there, and maybe Erica and Haley can add to that. Thank you.
I totally second working with people and also obviously creating the safe space. My first word that came to mind was gently. How do we gently connect? How do we gently invite people into that creative play, into that imaginative space, to connect with themselves before then they connect with each other, or even go into the dramatic contexts or those imaginative spaces. And we do that obviously a lot through breath as well, but creating a safe space, not just psychological safety, but the environment in which when you bring people together. So for example, in the project in Kosovo, we needed to have a very neutral environment in which we brought together so many different people, and you could consider some of those contexts as quite fragile, in which and some people had to cross borders that they hadn't traveled for over 20 years since the conflict. So yeah, so it's environmental safety as well as physical safety. And with play, with permission. I think that's where that safety comes from too, is the idea of permission and invitation.
Yeah, I think I would echo many of these ideas. I think the only thing I would add is that this idea of continuing to engage in the contextual reflection in terms of really thinking about that particular group, that particular location, in terms of things that may have worked in one place may not necessarily work in another place in terms of a particular activity or the way in which you introduce the activity. So very similar to other, I think, facilitation or peace building approaches, it's the idea of recognizing that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So sometimes people talk about dance being a universal language, and I would say that I think dance is a universal means of expression, and that there's lots of different languages within dance. So the idea of really looking at that particular locale and that particular group of people. There were a couple of questions that started to come around using dance and drama to treat depression and personal trauma. So I think that some of these ideas also connect with looking at depression and personal trauma. I would say there's a lot of work being done around arts and well-being that's not necessarily just in the peace building space. It's around creative aging or healthy living, sort of quality of life. And so that this is something that as arts practitioners, maybe we've seen and known for many years, but looking at how it also comes into other conversations as well. I don't know if either of you want to speak to that.
Haley,
I was just going to add, oh yeah, you go, Jackie.
No, you go.
Oh no, so I was kind of reading ahead and putting a couple of things together. This idea of ethics has come up too, and I suppose that's with trauma as well as the physical component here. In our work, it's networked. So you as the practitioner, my expertise is in drama. My expertise is not then in what might happen or what might come out of the work. So there is definitely drama therapy. There's a whole variety of methods out there in which people engage with art, with any arts practices. And my advice in that sense would be to ensure that you work with a strong collaboration of a team. No one person can offer everything. Of course, there are some times when we're working as individuals in the field, and that's slightly different, but you'll probably be able to draw upon others in that context. And there's always going to be people within the community that can support the journey of those participants, whether that be in schools, whether they be in sort of international contexts that might be quite remote.
Yeah, and just to add to that, oftentimes when we work with people that are established on the ground and that have come out of the trauma. They've already done a lot of counseling, and there's a reason why we do that. And because of that, the ethics around that. And we do not want to re-traumatize them, nor do we have, as Haley said, nor the skill set to actually deal with that situation. And we work through the networks. But oftentimes we work with people that are already established, that are working in communities. And they then form the network, but also the additional guard, for others that might come in, because they know how to talk to them and know the referral services wherever they may be. So always working within a group of people that already are established, and how then can they take the work out. Ethics is a big thing that we talk about as well too, because one, not to re-traumatize them, or to use their stories for different ways. Sometimes people can take the stories and use them for their own personal gain. For us, it is absolutely, we do not ever want to do that, because again, that is very unethical to take somebody's story without their permission. Also a story that is highly traumatic, sharing that is problematic as well too. So we try to keep those different things, but work only with people that have come out of it and that do want to extend the work. Thanks.
I think
yes,
one thing, the question about using arts in contexts where people are committing violent acts. I most frequently am using arts in situations where it's not a direct intervention. I think in terms of it's looking at it in a post-conflict or a peace-building approach that is more around the social cohesion rather than as a direct intervention. But I think that it's part of the social fabric and the way in which we're looking at building relationships and extending those connections and looking at different perspectives. Haley, I'm sorry, you were going to go ahead and say something as well.
Oh no, I've just seen the theatre of the oppressed has come up quite a lot. So yeah, this is certainly one of the foundational principles or tools in the applied performance toolkit that we use. So we are also very heavily influenced in that notion of the wild. So I agree, it's great. And then the other, there's comments coming up around more culturally general stories. There's a lot of different aesthetic ways in, so you could even use metaphor. At the end of the day, it's around connecting with ourselves as a practitioner to understand our own voices of judgment, cynicism, or fear. So how do we let those go in order to be really present, to create that safe container for the participants? But in order to also be able to identify, there is that holding that mirror up to reality. Sometimes participants understand that they're holding judgments and values and things that might not be serving them in that context. So it's, that was just my response at that point.
Yeah, thank you. Jackie, it looks like you want to add something, but you're muted for the moment. So
there's just the question of non-Western forms of engagement, and non-Western forms of engagement are applicable to theatre and peace building. As what other non-Western forms of engagement are applicable to theatre and peace building aside from theatre of the press? I think that, and again, I'll speak to the context to which I work with and about the non-Western forms. So a part of the stories, and I think of many cultures, oral traditional stories are there, performances are there, they're rich. How, one of the key things of our work is how do you connect? And that's what Erica and Haley have talked about. How do you connect meaningfully with people? And oftentimes for us, it is about the stories, it is about the metaphors, it is about the cultural artifacts to which they can use, recognize in order to start the conversations. And that's always. So we kind of do a little bit of an audit about what is there, and then how then do we incorporate that, synthesize that with the So for example, the drama forms that both Haley and I, we were involved in another project called the Life Drama Project. And that project harnessed ways of telling stories that were from the particular place and then woven in with Western drama forms, but always keeping with the worldview of people and how then do you use that to create the messages and the things that went. So it's quite possible, but doing a little bit of an audit about what is in the country and then working with that. Do you want to speak a little bit about that, Haley? Yeah.
Oh no, just completely in agreement. And it's an audit of what's currently happening, because also dramatic practices evolve over time. So reflecting on Papua New Guinea, yes, there were traditions, and I'm thinking of the epiphany and dreams. It's not even just dramatic practices that we would understand, that I understood them as, but also then folk theatre and dances. So yes, certainly an audit of the current context. But in terms of, I can see some things coming up in the chat of other areas of folk theatre and people making references. So if you want to look in the chat for some of those texts. We can also post this, create an email thread and respond to some of these responses from our own theory and our own research and references that we've used over the years. I know that I was looking at some Indian folk opera that I connected when I was in Papua New Guinea, but that is 12 years ago, so I don't have the reference on the top of my head.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that I found for me personally in my practice is a way to build that connection is through my own artistic practice. So in terms of honoring where I come from and what my background is as a dancer, and the willingness to be able to share that or to explore that in terms of understanding where I come from, but then being willing to learn and understand, explore, be the person trying to learn different dance steps or different styles. I feel that in some ways my willingness to be able to try something new and engage in that collaboration around practice, just purely from an artistic perspective. So, you know, putting the peace and conflict components to the side, but that artistic engagement for me has been really valuable in building those connections and relationships that allow the work to go forward.
Yeah.
I think, so I think we want to make sure that we have time for our breakout rooms. And so we have some questions. We have, first of all, I want to acknowledge the great facilitators who volunteered to help out with this today. So we have questions which will be shared both in the chat, and we've also created a Google Doc. Haley, do you want to explain the Google Doc slides?
Yes, so I believe someone's going to put that link into the chat box for us from the tech team, but all you do is copy and paste that Google slide doc into a web browser, and it's there now, and it is a collaboratively authored document. So you'll see that there are 8 groups in the document. We will have a maximum of 8 breakout rooms. I'm still not quite sure how many people are here. And in your breakout room, up on the top left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see which room number you are, and that will correlate to the group that you are in the doc. Don't be overwhelmed. There are 6 questions. We don't expect you to answer all of them. It's more about when you get into your room, either which question are you drawn to, or probably the last question might be a good place to start. We will then your facilitators will give you some instructions of how you're going to come back and share with us the conversations that you've had in your breakout rooms. So in your breakout rooms, you can keep this link also for afterwards. So you'll be able to see what other people in their breakout rooms have discussed, because it's incredibly important that we're collaborative and sharing beyond this journey. And equally, if you have any specific questions for us, you can pop them somewhere there. If you find a blank page, we'll go through this afterwards, leave your email address, and we'll make sure that we get back to you.
Hi, everyone. So we are going to shortly send you out into the breakout rooms. So you should get a message saying join session in the breakout room. And we've named the breakout rooms as per your facilitator. So please click on it. If you're on a mobile device, you might have to check your screen and maybe move one screen ahead to have a look at it. So if you're ready, we are going to go ahead. Jackie, Haley, Erica, can we send everyone to the breakout rooms? Okay.
Yes, about 25 minutes, and we'll see you back. So I might stay here if that's, Elsa, unless you need me to go to the breakout room. Is there a facilitator in that breakout room?
So Jyoti, we are not having Erica as a facilitator, reassigning her people.
Okay, reassign to
Erica,
sorry. Okay.
will stay here. So
Okay.
Yeah, so I know that some people, it looks like there's a few people here still in this main session. So, oh, great. Hi, Raymond.
Hi, sorry. Supposed to be a facilitator. I just got sent into a room with a facilitator, and I don't know if there's another room.
Okay. Can you send maybe Raymond to the room where I was going to be? Would that work? Thank you for helping us out today.
If you don't need an extra facilitator, that's fine too. I can.
Okay. I think Jyoti is doing the breakout rooms. I'm not sure. Is that Elsa? Is
Yeah,
that
so just give her a minute because
okay?
she's just trying to make sure that people are also there.
Okay.
Hi.
Great. So I don't know. It looks like there's a few people here in this session still. I don't know if you are able to turn on your sound. If you want to participate, or your video, maybe if video is not working where you are, but just wanted to make sure that if people still wanted to participate in the discussion, that we could go through some of the questions together. Well, Raymond, you and I could talk about the questions while we're waiting for the.
Sending Raymond to the next.
Okay. All right. So.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Okay.